This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Friday, November 29th, 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my co-host, my son, fellow investigator Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And, folks, you're in for a tremendous 3-hour program, 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored news, analysis, and information, stuff that you need to know. Really, we cut through the fog of disinformation, the lies, the misinformation, and give you the information, actionable intelligence, if you will. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us at our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. And I want to thank the Christians United Broadcasting Network, specifically Troy. God bless you, my friend. Folks, the Christians United Broadcasting Network does simulcast our show. You can find us there at the Hagmann and the HagmannReport.com. You have to spell it all out, the Hagmann and the HagmannReport.com, 2 N's on Hagmann. Spell out the word and of course it's .com. But thank you, Troy. Thank you, Christians United, for giving us the airtime to and the space, the bandwidth to simulcast there as well. Folks, thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us on this Black Friday, as it's known in the Western world. The feral humans out there who are, well, doing what they are prompted to do, I suppose, and that is to create havoc.
For electronic, trinkets.
I just can't.
I mean, did you see the headlines today of all? Oh man! It's not a shopping day anymore. It is a fight to the death for the last DVD player or discounted computer.
Well, I told my youngest daughter, I should say, what is she now? 23. Trying to keep track of all of this. I told her, I said, if you dare go out this morning or go out and participate in that, I will duct tape you to the chair. Seriously.
Is that why her car I saw was covered with snow, like it hadn't moved in a few days today?
And you haven't seen her either, have you?
No.
No, she knows, and people know that. Seriously, but we're being programmed to do this. The population, the dumbed down population, is being programmed to do just this. Have you noticed the incremental increase in the violence in this? I don't even know how to describe it, but compare today's events to last year and then the year before. But when did this all start? And I was working in my office, Joe, all day today, and the title of the program is "Something Is Wrong" or "Something's Wrong," and it relates to Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, based on some heavy-duty research I've been doing all day. We'll get into that later on, but I've just got to tell you, there is this programming going on for the entire population, at least in the West here, to take on this. Well, it's this fight to the death for anything new, and I believe that these are practice runs. Imagine, look at what's going on today, and imagine.
It's for food when nobody has money.
Right.
Yeah,
right. It's absolutely incredible. But anyway, as the program unfolds tonight, we'll be taking your calls toward the latter end of the
second,
third
show. Hour. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I want to point something out here. Very significant article, very significant story, and we can head on this later. But Pakistan, or a CIA spy or a CIA asset was outed in Pakistan, and of course now going to be tried for murder due to the deadly drone attacks in northern Pakistan.
Outed by who?
Well, we'll get into that later, but this is extremely important, I believe.
Okay. Well, yeah, I want to start off by going to a story about yesterday. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, spent time with their families, and enjoyed the food and family. Some people, although, had a problem. Here is a quick clip that's pretty sad.
The park. It's open to the public. Well, at least that's what we thought. But apparently not. If, we can't hand out free food.
Talk about no Thanksgiving at the park. Church members wanting to do a good deed by simply feeding the homeless instead are told to leave. Tonight, CBS 12 goes searching for answers.
You have to take your questions to the administration building. Are you the one that told these folks that? I understand. Are you the ones that told these people to leave?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm John DeCepolo. Happy Thanksgiving to all, but apparently not for the homeless, at least the ones living at John Prince Park in Lake Worth. Today is a day to think of others, which is exactly what some Christian folks wanted to do. But when the church group tried to deliver food to those in need, they were ordered to stop by a park ranger. Tonight, in a CBS 12 News exclusive, Israel Balderas tried to ask one simple question. Why can't the homeless be fed at a public park?
God takes care of us, you know. We don't starve. We're grateful.
Stephen Griffin and his wife Dominique are homeless. John Prince Park in Lake Worth is their home, and they're not the only ones. That's why a dozen church members,
I do whatever I can.
like Teresa Del Rio from Acts 2 Worship Center in Loxahatchee, showed up with packaged Thanksgiving meals.
We brought our kids out here so they can see what it's really like for people that are struggling.
We do a lot of mission trips and helping the homeless and stuff like that.
And this act of kindness was greatly appreciated.
We're grateful, you know, they hand out, we meet the guys and stuff, you know, they give us a prayer and everything.
But then, just as the homeless like Kevin were being fed, a Palm Beach County park ranger comes up to the church group and orders them to stop and leave.
Everybody just went, huh?
It's very disappointing. We didn't intend for this today. We just wanted to get the food.
So, CBS 12 News walked around Prince Park and followed the church members who just wanted to deliver the remaining Thanksgiving packages. Despite being told by the park ranger to leave or be ticketed.
Mr. Park Ranger.
Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
Good, how you doing?
Israel Balderas, CBS 12.
We also tracked down the park ranger that witnesses say was kicking out the church members.
These folks you have to take your questions to the administration building. Are you the one that told these folks that?
This being Thanksgiving, we were respectful of the park ranger.
They're saying that you told some church people to leave.
Hi, I can't
understand.
talk to you. My
You're a public.
don't want me to talk.
Park Ranger Mark said he was ordered to warn the church members that they were violating county ordinances.
What's the difference between having a picnic and giving out, hot dogs and burgers?
You need to direct your questions to the park's administration.
Could you just do me a favor? Could you just give me the ordinance in the county code that says they can't feed the homeless?
The park ranger couldn't cite for us the specific law that gave him the authority to kick out church members from a public park. So he called dispatch to ask for help.
Channel 12 is here, wants to talk to me about previous activities gone on here previously, and I'm not allowed to talk to them. They're asking to speak with you.
That previous activity would be the ranger telling the church group that they couldn't feed the homeless.
At first we were told only the director of parks would talk to us, but he wasn't available today.
Gentlemen would like to know the ordinance that we referenced for today's activity.
Dispatch told us that feeding the homeless was not a permitted activity by a large group, but what constitutes an activity and what size is too large.
So you're coming to John Prince in 10 minutes?
Yeah, stand by.
We waited for Mark, the park ranger supervisor, Max Stewart, to show up, but that never happened.
And I'm sorry I couldn't talk with you guys, but they got us strict orders.
Mark,
and what we were doing today, they also gave us. You were following orders. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
By the time we finished talking with the park ranger, Acts 2 church members were done passing out the food they had. The homeless at the park were thankful for people giving up their Thanksgiving Day to think of others. Tomorrow, they'll be hungry again, and if someone tries to feed them, that activity could be a violation of the law. For now. In Lake Worth, I'm Israel Balderas, CBS 12 News.
Now, we researched the Palm Beach County Ordinance Code under Article 2, titled Park Rules. We looked up Section 2129, Recreational Activities, and Section 2134, Public Demonstrations and Gatherings. By the way, neither of those sections ever mentions feeding the homeless as being against park rules. To see the entire interview with that park ranger, just go to our website, CBS12.
All right, that last part, very important. There you have it. The creation of a dependent society. Folks, look at this in the larger scheme of things. And Joe, I mean, can you imagine this act of kindness? It's okay if the state or the royalty does it. And I use that word very deliberately. But it's not okay if we do it. Why is that, Joe?
Well, we cannot do things to actually help or better people. We have to get a permit for that. No matter if it's feeding the homeless, to passing out literature on sidewalks, to open carry. I mean, you need a permit. You want to fish, you want to hunt, you want to walk, you want to go to a park, you want to. Right. It doesn't matter what you want to do. It matters what they say and regulate that you're allowed to do. And then
that's correct.
I mean, it's ridiculous. They're taking people in South Carolina and other towns that they passed ordinances in to make it illegal for someone to be homeless. Then they ship them off to these. They give them an option. You can go to prison or you can go to literal homeless FEMA camp. You have to have permission to leave the camp and have an escort.
That's correct.
Or go to jail because you're homeless, because you are deemed by this government, this society, no matter what your situation is. I mean, you could have been the vice president. You could have been a janitor. It doesn't matter. Whatever circumstances led to somebody being homeless shouldn't or doesn't mean that they are unwanted or not allowed to have the same rights as somebody who is not homeless.
But you're going to see more and more of this take place. And Joe, and ladies and gentlemen, here's the situation. And if I could, seriously, if I could kidnap RW there for a couple of days and keep him in my office and just, give him food and water, I'd like to do that because we've talked for hours upon hours about different things. But this is a difference between helping and managing people.
What is a profit county of the police, the actual city council, the people who make these decisions? What does it profit them to not let these groups feed the homeless?
Well, it is a matter of conditioning. We see it. We saw it with the different from Katrina to Sandy. Anytime the government steps in, they're not helping the population. They are managing the population, and there's a huge difference between the two. This is a very smaller scale, the microcosm of the larger plan, where you are not, as an American citizen or any citizen of the free world, based on the New World Order agenda, the plan that's being forced upon us, you will not be able to assist others. That is the goal and the role of the state. That's the role of the power. And this is, on a very localized level, this agenda that's being rolled out here. You folks understand what's going on here. This is not, and of course you've got the Nuremberg defense, which they had said, well, I'm just following orders. But there's nothing in the statutes to prohibit this.
Yeah, it's no wonder the park ranger's boss or whoever it was, the person in charge or making the calls, wasn't available, didn't make themselves available to talk with the news, because as we heard at the end of the report, there was no statute that said that they were in violation of any law, they being the homeless people receiving food or they being the church group that were giving the food.
That church group needs to stand up in that park and say, I demand you show me in black and white the ordinance that prohibits this activity in this park. You show me, and if you can't show me, then just get out of my face.
Now you say you were the one handing out food.
All right.
And you get a officer, park ranger, coming up to you saying you have to leave, or we're going to ticket you or arrest you. Would you leave?
Then I expect you to arrest me, and in so doing, then you read or provide me the exact code. You cite the chapter and verse of the rule of law under which I am being arrested. Yes, you do that. And if you can't do that, then put your handcuffs away and go away. Because I'll tell you, this church group somebody there needs to make a stand and say, we are going to continue to do this until you can cite chapter and verse the very ordinance that we are in violation of. Now, obviously they're not going to be able to do that, but understand this is the programming, the conditioning. This is the managing of the population. If you are not the state, which is creating a dependent society, then you will not be able to help others. That's what they're going for here, folks. This is the whole shebang right here. I mean, this is a microcosm. This is the example of
what
they're doing on a global scale.
We have churches feeding homeless, on one part of the world, and in many other parts of the country, I should say. And in other parts of the country, we have these mobs of people fighting, shooting, stabbing, tasering each other,
right,
to get a leg up on shopping.
Well, please understand how important this is, because this is part of the coming one world government being set up under the auspices of the United Nations. And you might think, well, where does this come from? You might ask. Well, the focus is.
It comes from hell.
From the bowels of hell, indeed. But you're looking at the economics, the religion, and the political part. But this is socialism here. This is exactly what socialism, an offshoot of socialism. And I would defy anyone from where exactly was that in this country? That was where? Where did this take place? I have it here in my notes.
Give me a second, and let me pull the story up.
But I would say this. I would really pressure whatever county officials or state officials are involved in this.
This is at Lake Worth, Florida.
Okay, Lake Worth, Florida. I'll tell you something. I will, although I try to get a hold of a couple of different county agencies today, and everyone was closed. But I think on Monday I'm going to make a call, and I want to find out exactly what is going on in terms of, you tell me.
Maybe even, get some of those church members on, because I've seen it too often. Last year there was a big push against it. They were actually arresting people, and some people said it was for show, and others said it was not for show. But this is something that needs to be
extremely important.
Further examined, because it's just complete. If we don't hold the local officials accountable, from the park rangers to the city council, then nothing is going to change. We need, in Lake Worth, Florida, and people outside of Lake Worth, Florida, to email these people, let them know, say, hey, what you're doing to the citizens, to the church group, to the homeless people. If there's no nuisance being created by them being there, they're not breaking any laws, you need to back off, or we'll take civil action against the city or the county.
That's correct. We need to take a stand. And Steve Quayle talks about the pastors having a responsibility to make a stand, and of course he does it in a different way than he presents it in a different way than I would present it, or I'm presenting it now. But we need to make a stand. We're all pastors. We're all these individuals attempting to help those in need. This quote that I'm looking at from my notes: how fortunate for governments that the people they administer don't think. Who said that, Joe? Your mic's off. There we go. All right.
Don't know.
No. Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
So everybody that ignores, and especially the Christian body of the church, but everybody, every free person, I don't care if you're in Canada, United States, Europe, anybody who is free today, who ignores what is the events that are going on right now, are going to suffer for their lack of activity and indecision when plans and comfortable circumstances begin to dissolve all around you. You will be unable to avoid your fate, because all avenues of escape will be closed. You're going to continue to be controlled and manipulated like a flock, like a sheep, and not even understand it. You're going to be slaves. This is going to become a prison planet. You're seeing it in this example in Florida. You're seeing it all across the United States at breakneck speed, and you're seeing it all across the globe. Those of us and those of you who have woken up and prepared, both physically, spiritually, mentally, you're going to be in a far better, far stronger situation and have a better understanding of what's happening and why it's happening. Now, the troubled times are upon us, of course, and will be upon us even in greater, much greater. But it's better to be informed and able to act than ignorant, confused, and lost. That's what I believe. And you've really got to understand the game plan of these socialists, these communists, these New World Order people, the Luciferians, And speaking of which, let me throw something here out of left field, folks. You know, the common ISON, Joe and I were talking about this right before the show.
I watched a quick clip. It it survived its pass around the sun.
Right.
So
no,
we're gonna see it.
Here's Joe and I were talking right before the show about common ISON, and that, of course, breaks into. And people might say, "Well, what the heck does ISON have to do with things?" You know, it's just a comment. Well, comments obviously portend rule changes or changes in leadership, often historically, and they're associated with various rituals, or at least people like the Luciferians or the New World Order people who adhere to this. They will practice rituals around celestial events. And think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If you knew above everyone else, as an example, and just consider this. If you were the only one in the entire world that knew that an eclipse, a solar eclipse, would happen at noon tomorrow, for example, and you stood, or you stood among a group of people or your family or whatever, and said, the skies will darken at noon tomorrow. And of course, it's a celestial event that one could calculate, perhaps. Wouldn't that give you, in the eyes of those around you, the ignorant of those around you, some sort of almost a deification, or almost some sort of, well, man, you've got to listen to this guy or this woman because they know what they're talking about, or they've got these special powers, yet it's an eclipse. You see where I'm coming from? If you think about things from that angle. But that said,
there was a movie Mel Gibson made. I forget the name of it. It was about natives in Central America, and they did. It was based upon the old Aztec or Mayan civilizations, and they were sacrificing, cutting people's heads off at noon, basically, and then this eclipse came. But you're right. I mean, this is what they used to do. They would know that there would be an eclipse coming, and the whatever you call them, leaders of society, whether they be priests or politicians, would say that this to their people, like, if you don't do the X, Y, or Z, the sun will darken tomorrow. And it was a control mechanism, a huge control mechanism. And
that's right.
Just by understanding through the dark and evil forces that were, guiding these people, having that understanding gave these people an advantage to manipulate the populations that they were dealing with.
All right. And that's a great example. I didn't see the movie. I don't know what the title of the movie is, but that certainly is a great example of things. But think about this, and I'm going to throw this out to the audience, the listeners. I don't know what this really means. I suppose one can draw many conclusions from this. In the satanic, Luciferian, New World Order rituals, religions, belief systems, numbers mean things. There's numbers, for example, 42, 44. 44 is associated with Obama as a leader, as is 42, but for different reasons. But 44, him being the 44th president. Now think about this with respect to common ISON. And folks, again, I don't know what to make of this, except to throw this out to you, and you consider it. Obviously, ISON is going to be visible in the skies over this planet here as time progresses. Remember yesterday, if you listened to the show yesterday, I briefly discussed the pagan ritual of Saturnalia. Well, in the context of Saturnalia, obviously on the 25th of December, at the end of this pagan ritualistic celebration, they sacrifice the leader of chaos, the king of chaos, which they had appointed 9 days earlier. So on December 25th of this year, in another month, less than a month from now, if you are standing in downtown Honolulu, Hawaii, at 4:40 a.m., and if you look 44 degrees at from true north, what are you going to see? common ISON. And I might add 17 degrees plus, which gets into the sacred geometry of 17.5, 17.47, but 17 degrees plus altitude above the horizon. And
if you're like me, you're saying, so what?
Well, yeah, I understand why you would say that, and I'm sure a lot of people are saying, so what? But if you look and understand what comets are supposed to be, or have the belief system of these really twisted New World Order people, and they have their belief system wrapped around numbers and rituals and so on. How can this be an accident? How could this be just some really odd coincidence? And also think too, yesterday I believe it was, Thanksgiving Day, if you were standing in Washington D.C. at 1:44 p.m., well, that's when the common ISON was directly overhead at its perihelion, I believe it's called. But can we perhaps look at the possibility that there's some type of pagan ritual, or ISON is being used for these pagan rituals, or maybe even through NASA, through some sort of twisted, power that they have in terms of mechanical power, that is, that we don't know about. Could the trajectory of ISON be being nudged for a specific ritualistic purpose? I'm just asking the question. I don't know. What does this mean? But I think there's something wrong here with this picture. And there are a lot of other anomalies associated with the common ISON and the number 44. But look at this in the picture, in the larger picture too, when we're talking about, look at the animosity that's building against Barack Hussein Obama and the United States as well. Could we be seeing the setup or a message being delivered that, hey, there's going to be a change made, a change in leadership? I don't know. Just throwing that out there for your consideration.
2 hours ago, there was an article released by the New Times entitled "Comet ISON Presumed Dead Shows New Life." It says astronomers are marveling at the death and apparent resurrection of a comet that dove close to the sun on Thanksgiving. Comet ISON passed within 1 million miles of the sun's surface at 1:37 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, by which time observers had already gloomily concluded that the comet had disintegrated and vaporized. NASA posted on Twitter, it's likely it didn't survive. ISON, which spent several billion years at the frigid edge of our solar system before starting its long journey toward the sun, had been billed as possible the comet of the century. Its demise seemed to be the ending of the story, but then it appeared again. Carl Batamas, an astrophysicist at the Naval Research Laboratory who has been observing the comet from Kitt Peak National Observatory in Arizona, saying, we see something come out. Well, interestingly enough, I watched a video which I didn't upload the audio to because it wouldn't have worked. But there were images taken from the satellites, and we know that the satellites constantly monitor the sun, and they continue to give a picture every 5 seconds, every however many seconds. Well, the data that came back wasn't showing anything. But also the textures in where they were having the CMEs come out of the sun, that stuff didn't change. You know how the sun moves and a CME blast comes out and you'll see the circle around it and it'll open up and loops will start and come back down. Well, that stuff didn't change at all. And at the same time, you're supposed to see ISON come around. Well, it wasn't there. Now, there are some images or videos that are showing it make the loop around, saying it went underneath the sun and came back over on top. But the images showing the backside of that, what it looked like going around, I haven't seen any. And I'm still, just started looking, but I'm still looking.
Well, and I think in the broader context of things, looking at I saw in the broader context. It's difficult for me, from an investigative point of view, almost 30 years as an investigator, really to try to wrap my brain around this global conspiracy. But it's there. I do believe it's there. I think that there's enough anecdotal and circumstantial evidence, if not direct evidence, to prove that it's there. You've got NASA, which really, when you get into NASA itself, and you start looking at the history of NASA, and you look at all of the things, the oddities associated with NASA, it's very difficult to explain away certain aspects of NASA. Now, why do I bring this in? Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about the New World Order's agenda, this push for global governance. Are we not? Every day we're grabbing headlines, or we're grabbing particular stories that show how we are being set up geopolitically. Look at what we're doing in the Middle East. We're rearranging the entire power structure of the Middle East. But why? Is it because we don't have anything to do? No.
I keep hearing
it's for
these
a purpose.
Talking points on that satellite radio from MSNBC to Socialism Today, whatever that station is. And all I hear is, the president's reduced the debt, he saved the healthcare system, he has, increased the jobs in America.
That's right. It's all programming.
It's just lies, flat out lies. And
that's right.
Then you have the news like the CNN and other shows on MSNBC that are diverting attention away from whatever with the war on, Republicans' war on contraception. It's just nonstop propaganda from both sides. And, we can't say this enough. We do say it a lot. But people watch this stuff. They believe it. They play into it. They take sides on issues that there is no right or wrong, or there's a right and wrong, but that's not presented. And
I was going to say, you might want to rethink that statement you just made.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what we're seeing here in the larger scale is this Luciferian initiation, I believe, into a New World Order. And on a smaller scale, if you would call a national agenda a smaller scale, we're seeing the takedown of the United States, as I had referenced yesterday, and we had talked about earlier in the week, the takedown of the United States as a power. And if you think about this, if you really look at the big picture, get your head out of the television sets and quit listening to the mainstream lame news and look at the bigger picture of this. We're seeing things unfold right before our very eyes. We're seeing the power structure in the Middle East by Barack Hussein Obama, who I believe now, based on a lot of research I did today in my office, it's amazing what you can do when you shut the door, turn everything off, throw a pot of coffee on, and just start researching. But 8 hours worth of research here. I do believe that Obama is, in fact, a CIA creation, a legend. But that said, what's he doing? Well, he's advancing the agenda of the New World Order, of which Zbigniew Brzezinski is perhaps one of the most influential members of Obama's internal circle of influence. And now we're seeing our relationship with the CIA-created Saudi Arabia, the royal family, now being disintegrated deliberately. And there goes the petrodollar. It's where we thought the demise of the petrodollar was going to occur through our dealings with in Syria via Benghazi. Well, they went to Plan B, I believe, and Plan B now is to assault the petrodollar through our abandonment or perceived abandonment, which may or may not be a good thing, of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, of course, as I mentioned yesterday, is going to be pushed directly into the arms of China. They've got economic problems currently, but their economic problems are going to be cured through the availability of cheap gas or cheaper energy costs through Saudi Arabia. And we, of course, are going to be cursed with heavier energy costs. So if you think that paying $3, and by the way, isn't it interesting how people have adjusted to paying $3.49 or $3.39, whatever it is, a gallon of gasoline today, wherever it might be in your country? Isn't it interesting? 3, 4, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we'd be screaming, but we've adjusted. It's the new normal.
Well, I thought gas was going down. In our area, it differs, 20 to 30 cents depending on where you go. It was $3.04 at the cheapest place.
That's cheap, all right.
I go to get gas and it was $3.35, and I'm thinking, when did this, increase?
That's the new normal. And wait.
Yeah, under Bush, people were screaming.
That's correct.
And it went back down. I think it was like $1.79, $1.89 when he left, even $2.
And this is something, this is something I learned though from my good friend, where the inexpensive oil, the lift cost, you've got to figure in lift costs for oil, meaning how much it takes to get it out of the ground. In Saudi Arabia, it's roughly we'll say $1 a barrel. That's and a barrel I think is 44 gallons, but we'll say there's 44 again, $1 a barrel. In the U.S., the lift costs are 80 times that, not 80% more, but 80 times that, at $80 roughly a barrel. So there is a difference in lift cost. So that will affect the bottom line. It will affect the cost of energy, whether it's gasoline or whatever it might be. But this is how this is shaping up. This is an orchestrated, what's going on in the Middle East right now, and as I referenced at the beginning of the program, the outing of a CIA officer in Pakistan, this is all starting to come together. All of the chess pieces are starting to be laid upon the chessboard. And what we're going to see is Saudi Arabia going into the arms of China, and then, of course, you're going to have Egypt and Israel joining in that political association versus the Russian, Iranian, Syria, and Turkey alliance. The United States is going to be the odd man out. The Brzezinski model is to get the Russians and Chinese to fight each other, and as I referenced again yesterday in the program, compare what's going to take place in the Middle East and in the Russia and China. Compare that to a domestic dispute. You've got a husband and wife that are going at it big time. The police suddenly appear. What happens? What happens when the police come in? The police officers listening to this, you know what happens. You got to duck or bleed, because the husband and wife team will now suddenly, they were at each other's throats 2 minutes ago, 2 seconds ago. Now they're going to look at you and come after you as the police officer or as the person coming into the fray. This is exactly what's being set up in the Middle East and all across the China-Russia landscape, the geopolitical landscape. So this is exactly, as I understand it, what's going to be taking place. And once Russia and China beat themselves senseless and then turn their attention on the United States, I mean, it's going to be chaos of the extreme magnitude. And one thing too I want to mention is, we've proven, hasn't the United States proven already, Joe, that we cannot, our friends in the Middle East and our friends all across the world can't really trust us? Well, our enemies have never trusted us. Now our friends, or those countries believing to be our friends, they're looking at what we're doing, our abandonment of certain alliances, and the trust is failing.
Yeah, and if we don't have the backings and support of our allies, as we are being destroyed as a nation monetarily, the power, our power is so spread out, that's trouble for us. I mean, we're going to be the black sheep.
We are the black sheep, and it's going to only get worse and worse and worse and worse. But everyone's got to understand where this is all coming from. Look at the Carter administration, arguably one of the most. Did you know, by the way, that James Earl Carter had no less? It's my understanding, based on research, that no less than 3 mental breakdowns. Right, and the run up to
not know that.
That's correct. Now, that said, who was Carter beholden to? Well, it was Zygmunt Brzezinski that he was beholden to, specifically that of the Trilateral Commission. And Brzezinski is the architect of this New World Order. And don't forget Mika, his daughter. Where does she work? MSNBC.
Government TV, yeah.
That's right. And Mark, I believe, is on the is part of the government as well, or part of the government in terms of I'm trying to think the National Security Division, but I think he's moved on from there or has changed positions. But the bottom line here is Obama has been, and I believe this based on my research today, Obama has been created. Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, was created by the Central Intelligence Agency, and you've got to go back to the Dulles brothers in the morphing or the evolution from OSS into the CIA by the Dulles brothers. You've got to go back to that time period. Then you've got to look at the grandparents of, both sets of grandparents of the man calling himself Barack Hussein Obama and Barry Soetoro. You've got to look at the parents, Stanley Dunham, Mama, and, of course, Lola Soetoro, as well as Barack Hussein Obama II, and look at the CIA connections back then or how that all came about. And I'm working on something here that it's going to take me a while, I believe, to birth this out, but I think it's important because what we're seeing is Barack Obama as a puppet, a legend of the New World Order finance capital, or the New World Order group, the worst possible group ever to be put into power for a very specific purpose, and that purpose is to lead the United States to destroy the United States just by destroying the middle class, by destroying the healthcare system, by taking out, presiding over the takedown of the petrodollar, and then subjugating us to an international ruling party. And that's what I see coming. And I think that the evidence, both anecdotal as well as direct evidence with respect to Obama's past, will bear this out. This is why, this is the origin or the nugget that is responsible for the birth certificate brouhaha, for the eligibility aspect. They're two different things, by the way. Birth certificate is different than the eligibility. The birth certificate is a fraud. The birth certificate has been proven to be a fraud. Who did that?
Prove it to me.
Well, I would think that if you or anyone out there prove that it's not. If I submit a document to the court, if I'm acting in a situation where I'm going to testify in a court of law and I'm going to give the court a document, does the court have to prove that the document is fraudulent? No. The person providing the document has to authenticate the document. It doesn't work the other way around, but we're being led to believe that it does.
The only document wasn't provided. There was a photocopy of a document provided.
That's right.
Does that count?
Little digits and dribbles on a computer screen.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there was Savannah Guthrie, the one reporter that was allowed to touch the document, should be called into the court of law, should be deposed, should be subpoenaed, and really a statement should be taken from her with respect to what she saw on the document and the photographs that she took and authenticating the photographs. Because I believe what's on the website, and this all relates to current events, this all fits together. I do believe what we're seeing here is an internal political coup orchestrated by the criminal element of the CIA and other government agencies, and not only our government, but other governments, and specifically the royal family, the royal family, to install this puppet in power to take down the United States. And don't forget, this also, if you want to talk about odd things that have happened, don't forget when Obama, as a junior senator, traveled to Russia
the
with
passport
Lugar.
incident.
That's right. Don't forget about that. And he was left with the Russian secret police for 3 hours. He was stopped. And folks, I don't know whether you heard about this, and if you haven't, just search Obama Luger. Well, something was taking place. In fact, his passport was taken and reviewed by the Russians. Now, what does that tell you? Is it possible that we've been looking at this, that Obama all wrong? That perhaps instead of him being, let me just look at it here. Go at it this way. Is it possible that he could be a agent of the British to subjugate the United States back under British rule? I believe that's very possible.
I think they already had that, though. I mean, the British have we have the United States Commercial Code, we have the tax system. They have established, they didn't need to encroach more. There was nothing else that they needed to do. They have already taken over our economy. They already profit from our travesties and the positive things when they do happen. And I think that what we're seeing is just the actual public theater or playing out like a movie that they've put this man in power to be the face of this is why it all went wrong, when in fact it was a system to 100 years that has been doing this and eating away bit by bit.
Well, let's go back and look at, just really quickly, if you understand, for example, the template, the Rockefeller-Rothschild template for installing their pawns in power here in the United States. Clearly, you go back to the Carter administration. I think that's a key period in recent modern history. Well, part of Carter was a wounded animal, so to speak, very programmable, very suggestible. Why? Because in 1966, he had suffered a nervous breakdown, according to the information my research. In fact, more than one. That came, of course, after he came in third in the race for governor of his home state of Georgia. Now, according to research that's out there, James Earl Carter at that time fell into a very deep depression, and he was lifted only by the solace that he found as being a born-again Christian. Now, how does this... Did you note, Joe, that particular angle there? It's almost as if they are using Christianity. They are, while saying, "Hey, he found his spirit, or he was able to bring himself up, pull himself up through Christianity." They're assailing Christianity. But anyway, the questions about his mental health caused various other senators, various senators, including McGovern, I believe it was, to question his role and his ability to govern. So we're seeing this programmable person in the form of James Earl Carter. Now, think about Obama. Does Obama even know the truth himself of who he is? Is it possible that Obama is indeed a Manchurian candidate really true to the very definition of the word, Manchurian candidate? It's just, you've got to look at this, to me, in my view, you've got to look at this in a larger sense and look at the continuous course of criminal conduct, of the criminal elements within our government. James Earl Carter, where they used him, and then we can go through all the presidents, but very suggestible, very subservient to a larger agenda. And this is what I'm working on this, and plugging in some of the CIA points, and which also brings me to John Brennan, the passport office break-in. How does that figure in? People talk about it, but do they identify it as a puzzle piece and fit it into the puzzle? Some do, some don't. I think it's an important piece of the puzzle. I think that Brennan, if you look at our current power structure, Brennan is head of the CIA. I believe that he was appointed to that position not only to ensure his compliance and subservience to the power structure or the power behind Obama, but he was rewarded for that for his handling of the passport office break-in. And of course, if you don't know about the facts of the passport office break-in, you can find that by searching that out. I covered that extensively in various articles about Benghazi. And then, of course, the passport office break-in leads you to the murder of Lieutenant Quarles Harris. Lieutenant is the first name, not a rank, of the young black man in Washington, D.C., who was going to cooperate with the federal investigators about the break-in office and about the identity theft that was associated with the passport office break-in. And, of course, he was summarily executed the day before he was supposed to meet with investigators. Isn't this convenient? So then I guess I said all that to say, if people don't understand that something is wrong, and something is wrong, we need to really, really get into that. So I don't mean to dominate the conversation, Joe. My goodness.
No, that's okay. We got a couple minutes before the top of the hour. We're going to take your phone calls the next 2 hours of the show. And we have some information or news that has come out on the Pope. One, this is from the New American. Pope Francis denounces market-based capitalism. Pope Francis issued a apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, on November 4th. It's the joy of the gospel in English, and it's been explicitly condemned free market economics with against trickle-down economics, causing establishment socialists to gloat. And it goes on to say that largely about the paper is largely about evangelism in the Catholic Church, touched on a sweeping variety of issues, including pastoral care, the mental health of evangelists, the international immigration, why women can't be priests, and many other issues. But the brief parts of condemning the free market have caught the attention of the press. Some people continue to defend trickle-down theories, which assume the economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and the workings of the prevailing economic system. That's from a paragraph from what the Pope said. Now, to say that it has never worked, one, is incorrect. Two, to say that, by using the free market system, we are giving the trust of the goodness to those wielding economic power. I mean, basically saying let the government, or capitalism doesn't work. And when we get into different types of economic systems, capitalism is the only free market-based system where supply and demand dictate what is going to succeed or not succeed, where innovation, competition, creativity, drive, these are the things that make businesses successful when they find niches in the market, when they are supplying a demand or supplying something that people highly demand. Not government determining what can and can't be sold. As I told you about 2 weeks ago, I saw a new John Stossel story on what does he do on Fox News, the investigative journalism, and part of it was on Regulation Nation, I think this was called. It was a part 2, but he goes and shows how the bureaucracy crushes small people, small businesses, how the takeover of the whole economy, and it's not just the economy, it's the way people live. How we talked to you guys about the EPA takeover that is happening and all the new major regulations that are going to be now mandate laws in society starting 2014. Such ridiculous things as if you have a stream or a pond in your backyard, it's no longer yours. It is the government's, and they have the power to decide what you can and cannot do with that water through the Clean Water Act. This whole total takeover through, government red tape, and it's mainly evident with the healthcare system. But you're going to see on the environmental side, the EPA turn into, the new Department of Justice, I would say. Forced home inspections, testing to make sure that there's no lead in your house, lead-based paint in your house. Deciding if you can smoke in your own house is something that Obamacare and the EPA have both talked about. And we see now there was a law passed, I don't remember which state it was in, but in multi-dwelling apartment complexes, they're now passing laws saying, well, if you live in an apartment complex, you are not allowed to smoke inside the apartment, regardless of what the landlord says. These are new city and state laws. And they are policing us down to the... Basically, it'll be to the point where they police whether we get up in the morning, whether we...
That's right.
What we have for breakfast. Just like 1984, the movie. And, when you think of 1984, at least for me, I would always think, well, this is they're trying to guess and give an idea. And I guess it's much more accurate. It's much more accurate than I ever gave it credit for, except for, I guess, just maybe because it looked older and the way certain things were done. But the ideas that are in that movie are...
The book, the novel.
Right. Well, there's a movie, too.
Right.
But the novel and the movie, they're both so true, it is frightening. And when we see the laws being passed that we saw, the healthcare law, this environmental justice through regulations, the implementation that we will see rolling out in 2014 will probably show that this nation is all but completely finished. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. When you have, navigators from the healthcare system, when you have people coming in to your home wanting to know if your toilet is environmentally sound, if your paint is environmentally healthy, when you have people sending school lunches back with their children, with their parents saying, you didn't include a food group, so we're going to fine you $10 and send the lunch back to you. I mean, this just micromanagement of the population is going to turn the population against each other, and it is going to lead to further disorder, which is what they want.
Absolutely. And let's go back to what you said about the Pope really assailing capitalism. Okay, the Pope Benedict XVI, the Jesuit leader, the Black Pope, perhaps. Don't forget what Tom Horn said. Let's look at the Pope for a second here before we go further, back up to that. Pope Benedict XVI, he called for the establishment of a world government and a New World Order in conformance, or that would breed or embrace what you had talked about, the micromanagement of everything, as well as assailing capitalism. Now, he made a speech at the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace on December 3rd, 2012, and he called for, and I quote, the construction of a world community with a corresponding authority to serve the common good of the human family. Okay, now think of that in the context of his incorrect assailing or description of capitalism. Now, as a means of defending global peace and justice, and for social equity, and for even the economic equity among the population, his vision for the establishment of world government and a New World Order is supposedly, now get this, not to create a new superpower, but a new governing body by itself that offers to the politicians, the leaders who are responsible for making decisions, criteria, government, and practical guidelines. Lastly, he's quoted as saying the proposed world government would not be a superpower. No. It would just be concentrated in the hands of a few, which would dominate everyone. Yeah, and exploiting the weakest. Okay, that falls right in line exactly with this unbelievable. Well, no, it shouldn't come as any surprise, because considering that in 2010 the Catholic Church sought the establishment of a new central bank, the Vatican sought the establishment of a new central bank that would be responsible for regulating the global financial industry. and the international money supply.
You have a problem with that?
Oh, well, it was, look, the Vatican sought a national authority that would have this worldwide scope and universal jurisdiction to guide and control economic policies and decisions. And did you know, now we're seeing it develop, and I mentioned this earlier, that China's new push for closer ties with Russia, this is just at three levels here. The growing intrusions from the UN with respect to the control of the Internet, and the latest remarks that you just mentioned by this Catholic Church, by the Vatican, I shouldn't say the Catholic Church body, all point to a new world order that's set in stone, that will set in stone a path, I should say, that we might just not be able to back away from. And I have a feeling that this is part and parcel to the ushering in of this one world governance, this new world order. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Report on this, the 29th day of November, 2013. With me in studio is Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann.
Gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Friday, November 29th, 2013, Black Friday, as many call it. We are in our second hour. We're going to start taking calls this hour. So get in line at 661-244-9839. I want to read this from Isaiah chapter 10. It says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob their fatherless. What will you do in the day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from afar? To whom will you turn, or to whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your glory? Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. For this is the anger, for all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still." And what we get here is we see, those who, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, that write grievousness which they have prescribed. Are we not seeing that? We know with the church, the church story, with so many other stories, these bureaucratic nightmares, legislating, one Christian helping another, that are turning aside the poor, the right of the poor, turning them into prey. I think we're seeing exactly that. And also, in Ephesians, and my father's going to join me now. He had an important phone call he just was on. It talks about, in Ephesians 4:17.
That was a red phone.
Red phone, okay. It says, "This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart." That speaks so clearly to what we see, the Black Friday culture. Once again, in Ephesians 4:17, "This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through ignorance that is from the life of God, through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart." So twice they say, "Walk not as other Gentiles, for they walk in the vanity of their mind." Don't be alienated from the life of God through the blindness or ignorance and blindness of their hearts. And this is something, 2 key points, the mind and the heart. When we have our minds and our hearts focused on the world and worldly things, and it is nonstop, and it's not only nonstop, it's being promoted while God's taken out. These ideas of, our desires, the knowledge of men over the knowledge of God, not having Christ dwelling in our hearts, but putting him on the side for when we go to church on Sundays. If we keep our focus on this world, we are going to be blinded by our own hearts. We're going to be put down to shame from our alleged wisdom of our own mind.
Well, and don't we see this taking place? I mean, the perfect example, Black Friday, everyone is being told. We're being told. We're being, society, the people, the mind-numbed zombies are being told to go out and take advantage of these great big bargains for things that you don't need to get with money that you don't have. But in the larger scheme of things, what are we really seeing taking place before us? It's a level of programming. And to me, this is extremely vital in understanding this, the deception that lies in the dark recesses behind this, all of the illusions that we're seeing. Are we not being prodded like cattle? Are we not being pushed toward that chute, that cattle chute, by suggestions, by programming, by the elected leaders? Whether we're talking about, hey, you can't feed the homeless in Lakeland, Florida, or on property that we own, you cannot help. We're being conditioned. We're being programmed. It's all a deception to get us to act in a certain way. And they are pushing us toward this cattle chute. And the dogs are nipping at our heels.
Exactly.
What awaits us at the bottom of the cattle chute? A slave planet, not a prison planet, but as I said before, but a slave planet. And what do they do to slaves?
Exactly. That's why we have to be above that. We have to be spiritually discerning and knowledgeable. We're told in Romans chapter 1, verse 21, it says, because when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and in their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into the image made like to corruptible man.
Well, we need to walk in the Spirit, but we need to act. Well, we need to walk and act in the Spirit, with divine guidance and with the protection with the armor of God. And I think that we have to act as Christians.
Right.
Don't you feel, Joe, that we have a responsibility to for example, the story in Lakeland or Lakewood, whatever county, city that was in Florida. Don't we as Christians have a responsibility to stand behind those people, stand behind that church and say, you're not going to push us off?
Absolutely. And I have a scripture here that, talks about how the Lord will be on our side if this is the path we choose to take, fighting against the evil. It says, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Well,
what we're seeing in a larger sense, and I truly believe this, in the larger sense, is this programming, this brainwashing. And I think if you look at Brzezinski's, you look at the New World Order, look at the structure of what's taking place, look at the calls. I mean, everything that we talked about in the first hour, the calls from the Vatican, the Pope condemning, for example, condemning capitalism. Look at all of these puzzle pieces, religious, financial, and by the way, financial is a big part of this because just follow the money. I really believe that we are entering into now the final stages of the George Orwell's, as you mentioned before, from his book 1984. During the break, I just pulled up a couple of things. Folks, if you've never read the book, George Orwell's 1984, a couple of things. Back within the book, 1984, Newspeak. What is that? Well, that's politically correct speech. Getting a little bit deep here, 1984 talks about the red sash of the Junior Anti-Sex League. Well, what do we have today to compare that to? The red ribbon of the Anti-AIDS Celibacy League.
National Gay Pride Day?
Well, no, the red ribbon thing, the Anti-AIDS Celibacy League. But, okay, 1984, the telescreens. can you envision that? And I never saw the movie 1984, but read the book. But can you envision that? Telescreens in every room, where programming runs 24 hours a day, and the pros have no way of turning the screens off.
In the movie, it was the beginning of the movie. It shows the guy waking up. It was basically a prison cell, very small room, where there was a big monitor.
Oh, you know what? I did see it. Yeah, you're right. But
it was just like that. It said, you have 12 minutes to get dressed and be presentable, and the automatic jail doors, opening and shutting, not by control of the people inside of them, but by the control of those who operate the facility they're in. Al Duncan's book talks about this too.
No, that's a fabulous book.
Yeah, it's a fiction, but it's not really, in my mind, it's more true than fiction. Will be the truth here in the future. But, these hierarchical levels, and we see this with going back to the church being kicked out of the park for feeding the homeless people. The person giving the orders, telling them, threatening them via the law that they need to leave, was only following orders, couldn't cite the law that was needed or the law that was being broken by those feeding the homeless, had to call his dispatch and ask for a supervisor to, which they never showed up. I mean, it's the same hierarchy. It's compartmentalization. You tell one group of people, for all some know, I bet they think they're doing certain things for good. Well, in reality, it's the opposite.
Right. It's the deception that is running rampant. The audio clip that we played on Wednesday, I believe it was, of Obama. You know that audio clip I'm talking about? I took it down,
yeah. Okay. I can put it back up, though.
But I got to tell you something. Every statement he made in that audio clip was a lie. Everything was a lie. And those lies go unchallenged. But you also mentioned the Agenda 21 aspect about. Did you not about earlier, the first hour, about smoking, for example, ordinances, and you had mentioned that, common walls. Well, look at the book, since you mentioned the book 1984, Orwell's 1984, in that book, people were steered away from consuming goods or smoking and chocolate. They were steered away from consuming chocolate and steak and sugar, coffee, and smoking cigarettes, and of course alcohol, is all by rationing. Now they're being steered away from things like alcohol and cigarettes by warnings that they're bad for your health, and of course they are, but also by taxation and by codification, by law. It's not the fact that we have these, you shouldn't engage, for example, in smoking and drinking alcohol. It's the fact that the control mechanism by our nanny state is declaring through their actions and their words these off limits. So all of this is taking place. And the telescreens, big time to me. To see these telescreens. Remember last year the saying that Janet Napolitano was going to be in every Walmart across the country?
Yeah.
All right. Well, and I talked last night. What about Walmart? You know what? And I'm not going to get into it tonight, but what about Walmart? If you look at the history and look at their function in society and look about how quickly over the decade of the 80s that they expanded and became so pervasive or ubiquitous all across the country. Well, was that through the good hard sweat and toil of the hierarchy of Walmart, or could we look at perhaps there's something else going on? I'm not against capitalism. In fact, I'm pro-capitalism. But then you've got crony capitalism and you've got this fascism that goes beyond that. So just think about that. All right.
I have a couple things here, if you'll let me
sure. I'll let you
hit this. One, this is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, what I'm going to read from right now, from their Strategic Sustainability Performance Plan, July 27, 2013. And this is their executive summary, their vision. This is what they state that their vision is in the executive summary. And it's stated as follows. The first HHS Strategic Sustainability Performance Plan, published in 2010, clearly and emphatically states HHS policy and intention to lead development and implementation of health-related sustainability goals across the federal government. The mission of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is to protect the health of all Americans and provide essential human services, essentially for those who are least able to help themselves. Sustainability has been defined as enduring the prosperity of all living things. By measure, sustainability is directly linked to the health of humans, the health of the environment, and the health of the economic system that support and promote our well-being. This triple bottom line, human, environmental health, and economic health, is integrated into the HHS mission and the sustainability mandate of Executive Order 13514. Just as the Department of Energy leads innovating relation to energy reduction, HHS leads innovative relating to health and well-being. As a key part of the federal community, HHS must assume a leadership role in promoting sustainability in government and public operations. Sustainability is integral to the HHS mission. Now, a huge part of the Health and Human Services Department is the FDA. And today, this comes out, FDA, scientists report, FDA unable to protect public health. After reading this document from the FDA's own website, it becomes apparent that the FDA cannot and will not be able to protect the nation's food supply, nor adequately regulate any new science. In their own documents, their own findings state, the FDA lacks the information science capability and information infrastructure to fulfill its regulatory mandate, and the FDA cannot provide information infrastructure to support, regulate products based on new sciences. And it goes on to state a few other things, but I mean, this is what we are working with. We are working with these agencies, Health and Human Services, EPA, FDA, AAA, whatever they are, FBI, all these executive branch government agencies that now have the power to write regulation, write laws, and implement them. They even say in many of their own papers that they are unable to do this. So why are they doing this? Why are we seeing all this increases in agencies, departments, and partnerships? Well, there are these environmental justice plans, the sustainable development plans, the implementation on sustainable implementation plans. It goes on and on. They have new green office guides for non-land-owning divisions. They published a high-level Health and Human Services Climate Change Adaptation Plan for the key foundation for the adaptation of resilience efforts. Now, many of you might be saying, Joe, you're just spattering off incomprehensible big words from a government PDF, and you're half right. But my question is, why is Health and Human Services getting involved in spending tons of money in climate change? Why is the CDC devoting its time and action plans to climate change and sustainable development? What does the President's Commission for Bioethical Research, or the Commission for the Bioethics, why are they playing such a key role in developing regulation policies for Health and Human Services and for the CDC? What does this all mean?
Let me ask you a question. What class of people does this affect the most? What class of people in the United States anyway? Well, in any free country.
You mean the endangered species middle class?
There you go. I believe that what we're seeing here is an attack on the middle class, because you see, in my view, the middle class that represents the largest of all population groups in the United States, and I believe throughout the free world. This historically unique body of people has been the mainstay in both the economic and political arenas of for certain of the United States, but no other country in history has, beyond the United States, has had such a well-defined, well-constructed, viable class of people. It's the middle class that all of these regulations are striking out against, and it's the middle class that's under attack by Obama, in addition, of course, to the Christians and the Judeo-Christian population, but it's the middle class. Because the middle class has always been a stumbling block to the ushering in of a new world order.
It's like small businesses. Small businesses made up 80% of the tax income, if I'm not correct, employment of America. Now we are seeing that's under attack. NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, all said, GATT, they were promoted, and during the second Bush Senior presidential campaigns, there was arguments about how, this NAFTA was going to just excel the business in America, the innovation, the work, bringing the jobs here, and it did the exact opposite. It shipped the jobs overseas. This is why we have no manufacturing or industrial sectors anymore.
Correct. And Joe, let me just say this, and ladies and gentlemen, the paradigm, the right-left Republican-Democrat paradigm, as well as the cheerleaders for the Republicans, the syndicated talk show hosts and the bloggers and the pundits, why were they so much behind NAFTA and GATT? Because they were brainwashed and programmed, and perhaps even answerable to something larger. And in order to rid itself of the encumbrance of a middle class, who's the architect? Who's the designer that's going after the middle class? Is it really Obama? No, he's the front man. If you start to look back and take a broader view of things, and I had referenced this, we together had referenced this in a previous show, the Club of Rome. Folks, if you don't know about the Club of Rome, I do suggest Dr. John Coleman has done extensive work on the Club of Rome. And I think some of his YouTubes might be, or some of his presentations might be available still on YouTube. They're dated perhaps 20, 30, 25 years. But he's also a prolific author. But they came up with a plan to emasculate America's industrial heart. We saw that, which would have, as an additional benefit, helped meet the One World Order goals of curbing population growth, as well, the eugenics factor. And all of the prophets of this New World Order, whether it be, we mentioned 1984, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, to John Ruskin, just to name a few. Well, even the Eugenics Society, founded by who? The Harrimans back in 1914. This is all the framework for a New World Order. And believe it or not, folks, you in the middle class, or you in the lower middle class or upper lower class, whatever economic definition you're in, it's through taxes raised to promote the so-called environmentalist issues that, Joe, you talked about. That's the most direct assault on the middle class. And we have to understand this, because we must not forget the shock troops being readied, who, when the time is right, they're going to take action against the industries, and they're doing this now. The farms and the fragile ecological balance of the planet, in the name of justice, social justice. So we should be very well aware of what's taking place. And Clinton, very much selected by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is kind of the umbrella group over the Club of Rome.
Well, let's do this. We'll start taking calls now, 661-244-9839, and we'll continue to go through the news as we take calls. I want to hear from you guys on anything you want to talk about, how you share with us about how your Thanksgiving went. As I said, if you were one of the people shopping today in the craziness of Black Fridays, especially those of you who still might be recovering from injuries while shopping, we'd like to hear from you. And on anything else.
Do you have tire tracks from the shopping cart over your back? Oh, goodness. Yeah, definitely call in 661-244-9839. I want to hear what you weigh in with your thoughts on what's taking place.
253, we're coming to you first. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, good morning, gentlemen, from the other side of the world. I was listening to Doug on Thanksgiving with you, And our Thanksgiving here, we had a good one with the veterans of foreign wars and some other retired military that are living in the foreign country where I am. And a couple of us discussed a couple of your comments, since we do listen to y'all. One of the comments that was made, of course, I think it was by Steve and Greg, about marginalization of the veterans. And military guys, when they get together, when they're retired, they all kind of talk about what they've done and all that kind of stuff. That's normal. So I was just wiggling my ears because I never really have thought of it in this way. And within the group I was in, we had quite a bit of expertise still around. Even when we're old and don't move as fast, the military mindset is still there. We had a field medical guy, a communications and intelligence analyst, combat skills in the form of a retired Marine captain, 2 people were snipers, and a couple pilots. And I can see why this kind of skills makes people nervous that are not happy with the possibility of veterans still being able to do things. So I think Steve and Greg are far more correct, or you may have said that, Doug. I don't remember who was saying that on your program, but far more correct than most people think. The veterans could very well present a problem to people who want to change things. And your Mideast analysis of 3 days ago was great. I used to do a bit of analysis in the military for intelligence and investigative, and I know it's pretty hard to take hard facts, grind them down into pablum, which you can put milk on, and serve them to your superiors, which then can understand what you're trying to get across. And for those of us who, don't do the research you do a great job. I don't know how many hours it takes you to do that, or if you ever sleep, but I appreciate the data that you do give us.
Well, thank you.
I
And the program
appreciate
with
that.
Steve and Greg, the program with Steve and Greg, that was a heavy one, and kind of scares me in a lot of ways. I don't scare easily, but I deeply fear that a large percentage of the population would not be psychologically or emotionally able to handle a lot of that information and would just turn it off. If it doesn't exist, it won't affect me. We have that head in the sand syndrome.
You know what, sir? I've got to tell you, thank you for listening, by the way, and I appreciate you listening all the way across the other end of the globe. And there's a little bit of a delay because of the distance, but I got to tell you, I've gotten emails from people who have said, "Look, I can't listen to your program anymore because what you're saying, I frankly don't want to hear," and I'm being dead set honest about that. Not many, but probably maybe a dozen over the last, 5-6 months. It's really kind of an interesting perspective. But I didn't mean to interrupt your stream of thought there, but so go ahead.
Well, I can understand that because, you take people out of their comfort zone and throw them into comments like were made by Greg and Steve, and, I just don't want to hear it. If I turn it off, it's not there. And regrettably, it's going to be there. But for those type of people, I don't know what the answer is. And, you also talked about militarization of the police. I remember my training officer of 50 years ago, so that dates me, could verbally defuse just about anything that we went into. I never once saw him draw a weapon. I was instructed not to draw mine unless I was in mortal danger. And he could sit and talk to people. He had a large German shepherd he took with him, that was his own dog, who was gentle as a lamb and just sit and curl up by his feet when he was talking to people. In 3 or 4 or 5 minutes he could diffuse things. The young kids, and I use that word kids, I think, correctly, that I see with badges nowadays, go in yelling and screaming, pumping pure adrenaline without even giving a situation an analysis, and expect instant compliance. And I think the difference is we were, as you have indicated, peace officers versus what they see themselves now as law enforcement. And regrettably, they can't tell the difference between a 5-year-old with a Nerf bat and a perpetrator with a M14 over the shoulder.
That's frightening by itself. But yes, there's this movement from Well, from the Andy Griffith of Mayberry being a peace officer and a member of one's own community, just to serve the people, to bringing in law enforcement, a very big distinction that people need to make, to subjugate the people in that jurisdiction to outside forces, and we're seeing this more and more. So there's a huge difference, and I'm glad I'm glad you pointed that out. And of course, the adrenaline rush, and you see these federal authority law enforcement agents with masks and the riot gear and full paramilitary gear going against the people. It is really a matter of conditioning and really pushing the population into that cattle chute I referenced earlier, I believe.
Well, in my last full-time law enforcement job, I carried a federal badge, and I just, thank the good Lord now that I don't, and after seeing what's moving around. But my most recent area of expertise has been in field communications. And the book, I think it is The Day After or something, talks about an EMP and people in a community coming together and setting up a communications network and supporting themselves and the bad guys coming down the street. Reminds me of the groups that many counties and states are setting up now for communities to prepare themselves. And communications is one of the essential factors. A lot of times it's lacking a bit. And the people are relying on the family radio service, little things that you buy in Costco and Walmart and stuff like that. Right. They think the privacy codes encrypt things, which is the biggest joke in the world, because I did work on a very, very sophisticated mobile command unit, not in the past 3 years, but when I was going back and forth to the States a lot when my mother was alive, and I was a local hire, slave wage paid volunteer status, more or less, but I was one of the senior operation officers due to my background. And we always used to monitor all of those frequencies, the FRS, the business band, the marine band, the common radios people can get a hold of. And when we were going into a situation, we thought communications might be a factor in the people we were targeting. And you wouldn't be amazed, but a lot of people would be, as the way people talk on these radios, they think nobody else can hear them. And it's an interesting lesson, because in any situation that you do need privacy in communications, I would recommend you might want to look at, I think it's a Midland brand. It's a 900 megahertz spread spectrum frequency hopping radio, which is very, very difficult to monitor. We couldn't monitor those things. We could monitor about everything else because of the radio equipment we had, but we didn't have equipment to monitor those. You might want to ask Yoda about that next time you're chatting with him, if he has any comments on those. I know the Army PX had those on sale about 3 years ago. They're about the same price as family radio service, but they are a different frequency, and they are very difficult to monitor.
Interesting.
And speaking of Yoda, you may want to get his comments, too, if he would do it, on the national move for emergency services, police, and what have you, to go to trunked radio systems. When they work, they're great. When they don't, they're horrible. They do allow interoperability between people of different departments, but they're computer dependent. And it's not that difficult to find out where the computer controllers are for these things and various parts of the infrastructure. And if that goes down, you might as well take your radio that you were talking on and throw it at somebody, what has about as much value, as a brick.
Isn't that what we saw?
And that, to me, some of us see a problem in.
Okay, isn't that what we saw, by the way, on 9/11 with the EMS citywide, or the emergency citywide band, where the interactivity between departments and from the radios to dispatch, if you find the audios on the internet, they're useless.
That was, sir, and didn't work inside buildings. And on each talk group, there are so many assigned radios that can be on it at one time. Unlike the old analog system, where you can have 100 people on one frequency, and you just need discipline to see who chimes in next. These can get overloaded, and there are problems. So it's an interesting thing from communication security. And there's a lot of interoperability going on now, which I'm sure you know, between the military and the local law enforcement. In my state, we had a civil support team run by National Guard, and I think most states have these. And they used to work with us a lot because they didn't have the technical expertise to maintain some of their equipment, and we had a very sophisticated technical team. But we used to experiment by tying their military radios through this unit called an ACU 1000, and we could tie their military radios into our fire dispatch frequencies, and from downtown and fire dispatch they could talk to the National Guard headquarters in a different location. And this is good and this is bad also, because they can actually take over frequencies and, run the whole show if they need to in the military. So Holly Deo's got some excellent stuff on communications. I really, really would recommend her book, Dare to Prepare, for anybody that's interested in, the community groups and everything like that. And amateur radio. The Mormon Church has done an outstanding job of hooking their people up in various communities through amateur radio. And the test is easy to take. The radios are cheap, and it do give you quite an open window to communications in times of emergency. Just like in the Philippines, they became far too dependent on their cell phones and text messages, and when the cyclone came through, it wiped out the cell towers. They'd neglected to maintain their local government radio networks, and they're depending on amateurs and the military to set up communications, which is actually functioning now. So that's what I'm thankful for on Thanksgiving, for you guys, for the information that you bring us. I don't see how you get some of your guests, but the information they have is spot on, and I pray to the good Lord for your safety, for you and Joe and Steve and the rest of the people you have, and that you will be able to continue to let us know what's going on that nobody else does.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for your call from all the way across the planet. Enjoy the sunshine and the
absolutely
and the walk in the sand as you listen.
And I remember this caller. He has a perfect radio voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to hit on a quick
go ahead.
story here, and then I'll give it to you, and we'll go back to calls. Is it safe? Radioactive Japanese wave nears the U.S. In the wake of the deadly tsunami that hit Japan in 2011 and severely damaged a nuclear reactor, Japanese officials say the levels of radiation are safe for everyone outside the reactor area itself. But as radioactive water from the plant nears the west coast of North America, the water is expected to hit in 2014. Can we be sure it's safe? This from an article on Fox News. The nuclear reactor continues to leak radioactive water due to poor management, while Japanese subcontractors at the plant have admitted they intentionally underreported radiation and that dozens of farms around Fukushima that were initially deemed safe by the government actually had unsafe levels of radioactive cesium. Fukushima locals also claim they are seeing cancer at high rates, and the Japanese government is covering up the scale of the problem. So what do independent estimates say? The first measures come from the U.S. government. The FDA has stepped up its monitoring of radiation in seafood due to the Fukushima incident. They say that we're actively watching for information that could implicate U.S. food and are always ready to take further action. Meanwhile, the EPA keeps track of radiation within the U.S. borders and presents data online in nearly real time through RadNet, a national radiation system of monitors. But regardless to say, the water they're talking about, another wave. Remember we had the first wave of radioactive air.
Yep.
Then we had the wave of radioactive debris.
Ditto.
Now we have the wave of highly radioactive water. And this is so dangerous, so deadly, so massive a problem that I don't know that we can come back from the damage, even if it was stopped today. The damage is done.
It's interesting because if you go onto the internet and there's a somewhat popular well, it's an internet forum, and I was watching earlier, very much earlier today. I was watching the dialogue between the members of this forum, and talking. One would say, "Well, you don't understand. The radiation is not that bad. The Pacific is diluting the radiation, not diluting, but diluting the radiation, and this undercurrent of this very frenzied fight, this war on this forum. People saying no, it was all over. There was a news report that was called by one of the members of this internet forum, very irresponsible, where they're talking about perhaps having to evacuate the West Coast because of the radiation of Fukushima. They're saying, "Oh, that's just hype." It's all hype. But when I look at this, and when we all look at this, we are, aside from being in uncharted waters here, uncharted territory, I believe that we are being deceived once again, because you look at what is taking place with Fukushima, with the Japanese mob essentially being hired to take out the rods of the reactor, and one slip, of course, could cause exponential damage and more radiation. Folks, this is something I believe we need to pay attention to. And there were some people saying, well, what can we do about it anyway? Well, you've got to be informed. You need to be informed. So
yes, you do need to be informed.
Right. By the way, going back a little bit, I just want to thank Glenn. He writes in that the book 1984 should be required reading. It was when he was in school, and he goes on to say that, the thing is that we're already there. What's happening today is an order of magnitude more sophisticated and slick. That was described in the novel, and most people don't and won't even recognize it. Thank you, Glenn, for saying that. Yes, I do agree with that. And, of course, Beata, thank you very much, to point out, by the way, that the same thing, the feeding the homeless in the city park, that very same thing happened in Seattle during January of this year. The mission had been feeding the homeless for 70 years, and suddenly they come in and say, no, you can't do that anymore. Once again, this is conditioning and control, and it's phenomenal. And also, Pat, thank you very much. Pat writes in, an ID required for all people in Tennessee to buy alcohol. She believes it's a conditioning practice, and she adds this. She says, I just want to tell you that I was at a local supermarket today in East Tennessee. Well, a woman was about 60 years old. She was told that she had to show an ID, a photo ID perhaps, so she could buy the beer that was in her grocery cart. Now, she asked the manager, why? Why someone who is so obviously over the lower age limit, over 21, had to show an ID to buy alcohol when it's legal for anyone to buy alcohol if you're over 21. Now, he said that he didn't know, but that's now a state law.
Just like in New York.
That's right, if you want to buy cigarettes.
You have to show ID to buy any tobacco product.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're 100 or,
And they scan your license, at least in New York. When we were up in New York, we watched as people readily handed over their licenses. And this was a very large convenience store chain in New York. This is all about conditioning. This is all about getting people to do something. This is all about getting the cattle prodding of the population into these chutes and what awaits them at the bottom of the chutes, but, of course, the butchers. And not the butchers of Baghdad, but the butchers of the United States and the entire free world. And I don't think that's hype. I just want to get into this real quick, Joe, and I'm going to pop it back to you. We had talked about China, and we had talked about oil over the last couple of days. Well, earlier today, Exxon sells Iraq oil stake to, guess who? PetroChina. American energy giant ExxonMobil on yesterday, sold part of its controversial stake in the massive Iraqi oil field to PetroChina. And, by the way, Indonesia's Petromina, I believe that's how it's pronounced, amid a long-running row with Baghdad. And this sale of the stake in this field, it's south of Iraq. It's one of the country's largest. It does denote a very key step toward resolving this supposed dispute, or this orchestrated dispute with the central government over Exxon's contracts with the Kurdish region of Iraq. But wasn't the bill for this Iraqi police action, wasn't that supposed to be paid through the profits of oil? What happened to that? But you see, folks, we are now seeing this move, this gradual shift to China, as we had explained through here this week, and I talked about yesterday. Are we not seeing this move, this overtaking of China, by China, that is? And China will cure their economic ills through the cheap energy. And what's going to happen in the U.S.? Well, obviously, the petrodollar is going to be killed off. And anyone who says that's hype, or that's fear-mongering, fear porn, doom porn, whatever you want to call it, folks, please understand this is all part of a larger agenda, and we're seeing it play out. So that's very important to understand. Exxon selling Iraq oil stake to PetroChina. Do you see how this is playing out?
Yeah, we do. We're taking another call before we hit the top of the hour break. 6:05. We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, guys. It's Laurel from South Dakota. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I had a question on the conversation or the discussion you and Greg and Steve had last week. And also, I had 3 suggestions for guests I think would be very interesting. The first one would be, have you ever had Ann Barnhart? I know you've talked about her. Have you ever had her on the program?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I don't know if you've seen, I think it's kind of recent. She did a real interesting YouTube on Islam and sexuality, and it's very, very eye-opening, to say the least. And I just think she'd be a real interesting guest to have on. Another one is this Jim Garrow, and it kind of gets into my question. I don't know if you've ever had him on, or are you familiar with him? He's the supposed ex-CIA agent that released some of this nuke information.
Yes. Now, yeah, we're familiar with Jim Garrow.
Okay. And
we're looking at, just to be clear here, we're looking at some things with respect to the authenticity of...
Okay, yeah, because that's going to lead into my question. And the last one I think would be a real interesting person is John B. Wells from Coast to Coast. I think he could touch on anything. You know, he's got an interesting theory on the JFK assassination, and anything Clement Ison, and anything. I think he'd be real interesting to have on personally. But now my question is, I guess it's leading into, you guys are going to look into the validity of this supposed nuke that went off in the Atlantic, and there's still 2 missing. And then they were talking about nuking. Was it D.C. by the end of the year? I kind of was wondering if you have any more information about what they were talking about, or what the rumors are or speculation is at this point in time on that.
Well, we do, ma'am. I'll tell you what, we're getting like a really bad feedback. We'll answer your question off air, or when you hang up, if that's all right. Is there anything else you have before you disconnect?
That's it. Thank you.
All right.
That's it. Bye.
Sure. Whatever was going on there, that feedback was really wrapping my brains. But very good questions. Now, of course, there was this discussion, and it was offered initially, or one of the messengers of this nuclear situation, about nuking, perhaps studying a nuclear device in D.C., Jim Garrow. Well,
the
ex...
today?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Well, he's the ex-CIA asset.
Okay. I was just wondering because I do have his contact information, and I didn't know why. I thought he was a guest before, but apparently not.
No, not Jim Garrow. And I don't think you have his, well, you might have his contact information, but we're looking at a couple of things. It's not to say that the nuclear story or the nuclear reports are incorrect. We're just looking at that from a different angle. Let me just put it that way. If you look at Mr. Garrow, and we believe him to be a very respectful and responsible individual. However, a couple of things that are associated with the pagoda, the Chinese pagoda. Now, you know what I'm talking about, Joe? No, okay. The Chinese pagoda front, if you will. We've got some questions on that I'd like to have answered before we bring him on, and maybe that would. I guess that's kind of troublesome, but a couple of dueling bits of information. But the core issue, though, about the nuclear.
Yeah, what happened? The nuclear. What's missing?
Well, from Diaz. Yeah.
And where is it?
Well, and this is something that Steve Quayle and Greg Evenson touched upon. This is something that a lot of people have touched upon. It's easy to say, for example, that a nuclear device was detonated in the Atlantic, and then, of course, how are you going to prove that? And there are a lot of issues. Now, is that? But am I saying that it didn't happen? No, I'm not saying it didn't happen. But what I guess what I'm saying is when you make statements like that, there is an immense problem with the authentication of such information. It's how you say it, because if you would take a position that this did happen, and of course, there's a nuclear threat here in the United States, and of course, we've seen this happen before, a nuclear threat, and setting a date with a threat. We're very careful. Just tread very carefully when you enter that ground. That's my position. Do you know what I mean, Joe? I mean, it's, and I think
I do, because we have it's not provable. We have speculation, as you say.
Yeah, and think about this. I do believe, and I think I'm safe to say this, that if you look at this, if we talk about the zone of incidents, okay, if you're in a particular area or zone or Coliseum arena, whatever, if you're talking about this, about, we'll say, a decapitation type of an event of our leadership, and I do believe that to be part of the agenda, to take Obama and even Biden perhaps, or even a large part of our leadership out. I believe that to be on the agenda, on the to-do list of the globalists. I really do. But how? And are we really going to? Are we going to, stick ourselves to, we'll say, a nuclear device and say that this is how they're going to do it? I think we have to look at all plans. But I do believe that nuclear threat is there, especially in light of the missing nuclear warheads or nuclear devices from Diaz. That is extremely important, and considering, too, the purging of the military, especially the high-ranking military officers responsible for the oversight of the nuclear arsenal, America's nuclear arsenal. So I don't want to convey the wrong message, because I don't want people to take me the wrong way. I just want to be very certain when we enter into that territory, because a lot of times people will say, well, my goodness, can you imagine nuking your own country? Well, of course, I can imagine that. If we believe that the criminal elements of our government were behind 9/11 or involved in some way in 9/11, isn't that kind of saying the same thing? Isn't that of the same caliber? And I believe that to be the truth. But when you start to go down the road and try to explain how or in what manner, for example, Dr. Judy Wood did a fantastic job, I believe. But when you adhere to a certain specific course of action, this is how they did it, or this is how they're going to do it, then I think you've got to, if that doesn't come about in that fashion because they have multiple plans and other plans and backup plans, then I think the credibility is kind of attacked. People can attack your credibility. if you get married to one particular plan or plot or scheme. Does that make sense? I don't want to sound like I'm
no, it does.
Backpedaling or trying to hedge from things. I'm not. I just want to be very, very specific, because we know what they're going to do. But do we know really with precision how they're going to do this?
Absolutely not.
Okay. That's kind of the point I was trying to make in a very convoluted, twisted sort of way. All right.
One interesting piece of news before we go to the top of the hour break. When we come back, we're going to take as many phone calls as possible, the lightning hour for the end of the week, Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And this last piece of news, 4 out of 5 people stop breathing correctly when typing an email. I thought this was interesting because it made me think, Dad, you write a lot of articles. We both spend the majority of our time reading online in books, in typing different things. This from Natural News. 4 out of 5 people regularly stop breathing while typing emails, according to studies conducted by former Apple executives Linda Stone. The condition, which health professionals are calling email apnea, may lead to serious health consequences. If people are in a stressful situation, perhaps having to deal with some stressful communication, they might end up holding their breath, said Edward Grandi, executive director at the American Sleep Apnea Association. It's not just an email, it's emails and texting. Gizmodo blogger Adam Clark Estates wrote that he had noticed the condition in himself whenever he was concentrating on writing an especially difficult paragraph. I must have looked a little too deeply into the zone, he said. A head shake and a couple of breaths later, and I was back at it. But the pattern is hard to break. And it goes on to talk about the conditions that these can lead into. And it's really something that, is really not that big of a deal, but something to keep in mind.
It's kind of an interesting, when we look at things, when we look at our habits, our personal habits, our habits at work and at home, and you're typing an email and oxygen deprivation.
I hear you typing over there, then I hear occasionally, but is that what that's about?
No, those are exclamations of just of sheer desperation from me. But before we go to the break, before we go to the break, I want to just point this out. Folks, remember we had talked about the alliances in the Middle East. And once again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. W, there for this. From Turkish Central News. Now consider this. And were we ahead of the curve in talking about this here on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report? I believe we were. Because now, from Turkish Central News, it's being reported that Israel and Saudi Arabia together, that they may cooperate in an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. This following the announcement, remember that announcement of the agreement that was reached between the P5+1 in Iran on last Sunday in Geneva? Well, now it looks like this is coming to pass, where Israel is now working with the Saudis on an attack plan. They will unilaterally, together, I shouldn't say unilaterally, attack Iran. What does this mean? So if this does take place, what can we expect here? Do you
World
think?
War III?
Well, I got to tell you, does the Bible not talk about, in the larger sense, about Israel being a stumbling block to the world? Yep. Do you think, how would this play out if this does happen? And I suspect that these alliances are forming, and we had talked about this. If Israel, in conjunction with Saudi Arabia. Oh, and by the way, Saudi Arabia, do you think that they perhaps will become a nuclear power? And if so, where will they get their nuclear power from, or nuclear equipment from? It would be from Pakistan. And of course, Obama continues to bomb Pakistan, and has bombed Pakistan via drones, especially in the northwest area. And that relates to what I said earlier about, the Pakistan drone attacks leading to the outing of a U.S. CIA operative who is now going to stand trial for murder. Oh, it's a convoluted, very, very convoluted world in which we live.
Yeah, we're going to go take a break now. One more thing before we do. I want to ask everybody, and I want to thank everybody, as I wasn't here yesterday, and thank you, Dad, for saying this, but please keep Larry in your prayers. Larry's a close friend and a friend and listener of the show, and he is in the hospital dealing with some heart issues, and he needs our prayers more than ever, as these are serious issues, and we need to keep him around. So please keep Larry in your prayers.
And Larry, I just want to say this. If you're listening in the cardiac unit in which you're in, first of all, God bless you. You've got my prayers. I will hit my knees tonight and pray for you specifically. But I'm going to tell you something. God's not done with you yet, I don't believe. And, well, that's just me. I don't believe he is. You got some work to do, pal. You gotta hang out and stick around and get better, get stronger, because you still have work to do. How about me laying a guilt trip on you like that?
That's right. We need to keep you around. So God bless you, Larry. I hope you keep getting better. And listeners, I hope we can pray and get him in better health. With that, we're going to take a break and come back with your phone calls. That's 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. A couple of stories we'll hit if we have time. Supreme Court agrees to decide if Christian-owned businesses must violate faith and obey Obamacare. And also, we have the U.S. concerned over fresh.
This is 61244-9839 in a lightning round fashion, meaning let's try to get in as many calls as we can and keep things rolling quickly. Before we get to the calls, remember Alexander Litvinenko, the Russian, the KGB officer who died of radiation or some type of radioactive poisoning back in 2006? Remember him? Well, the word here recently, just out today, and this comes from Intel News, which is a consortium of intelligence experts. They provide news and commentary on various things. In 2012, a court in the UK was told that Litvinenko had been working for British MI6 when he was killed. The reason I mention this, can you see these alliances? And, of course, can you see now how the evolution of these political alliances are going to play out with the Commonwealth, with the Crown perhaps being at the top of this political New World Order structure, administrating the financial and the political and even the religious parts. We, again, in the United States, will be subjugated, or at least that's their plans, under the British Crown, under the royal family. The Camelot, the new Camelot, the new Atlantis. This is what at least their belief system is. And if you think that I'm kind of really out there, I would have thought so too a year ago, 2 years ago. But if you kind of catch up and look at the facts, and it does make more sense. The death of the murder, I should say, of Alexander Litvinenko does make more sense now, knowing that he was an asset for the UK, the British MI6. So, yeah, he came down with a serious case of radioactive poisoning right after meeting a former KGB colleague at a London restaurant, and many suspected that the Russian government was behind his murder. And it's interesting, the dead spy, Litvinenko's family, had argued for years that his killers did not only kill an intelligence defector, but also an officer of British intelligence. Folks, expand your mind. The lie is bigger than we even can comprehend. I want to thank you, Jan, very much for your email. Sandy, Jan, and others, God bless you. Thank you so much. Joe, and Margot, God bless you. David, and my goodness, my inbox is full. All right.
we're going to go to the phones, and we're going to take your calls the rest of the show. So get on hold if you're not already and you want to weigh in. We're going to go to 904 next. Thanks for calling in. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, I bet that's me here in Florida.
That's you.
All right. God bless both you and your father, sir. I've enjoyed
Thank you.
Listening to your show now for about 3 months. It all started listening to George Norrie, and he had Pastor Lindsey Williams on that particular night, and everything just happened. As you know, things pop up on your screen when you're on a computer, and you just get directed to interesting subjects here and there, and y'all came about one night, and of course your show, hearing about Dave Hodges. I've enjoyed so many people. Steve Quayle. It's just expanding every day. Anyway, my question is, Lindsey Williams has a statement. Pastor Lindsey Williams, I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Sure, we've had him on as a guest, by the way.
Yes,
we have had him on.
He has a statement that possibly in the next 3 months there's going to be a financial event that'll be global. It's going to be so extreme that there will be starvation, rioting, and possibility of martial law. Do you have any idea what this is going to be? He said to keep looking back at his website, and he'll expand on that later on. He's sworn to secrecy and until he can release further statements. Can you even begin to imagine what this might be?
Well, wow, that's a great question. I have seen that. Joe and I have talked about this latest statement, assertion by Pastor Williams, and I believe he does
involve the IMF.
Well it would. Anything on a global scale would involve the IMF as well as the various central banks. Personally, I believe, and I could be totally wrong, this is speculation on my part, but as we have talked about before, the glue that's holding the fiat currency Ponzi scheme together is really the petrodollar.
The derivatives market.
Well, yes, ultimately. So I would think that it would be something to do with the attack on the ability to protect or to transport oil. It would have to be. I believe it would be an attack against our ability to ensure or assure the passage of the free passage of oil to various countries, whether it be an escalation in the Middle East with respect to Iran, Israel and Saudi Arabia attacking Iran, and then, of course, perhaps Iran taking the blowback from that, maybe threatening the Strait of Hormuz or other things. I think that's probably where I would look first, although there are plans B, C, and D. So, but that's my view.
We also have all this massive oil that Pastor Williams talks about that's up in the Gull Island area in Prudhoe Bay in Alaska. That's not even a drop of it's ever gone anywhere. If they were to shut down everything in the Middle East, couldn't that be tapped and spread around the world?
Well, it could. It most certainly could. However, there's a couple of issues.
We need the pipeline built to move all this.
There you go. And the refining process as well as the pipeline. What has Obama done?
Made sure we haven't built any more refineries, that's for sure.
Bingo. There you go. And tank the pipeline. So there will be a lag time, a very critical lag time in tapping any of the reserves in that area.
Do you think it would take at least 10 years or more, or could it be done quickly, like a couple of years?
I think it could be done relatively quickly, but will it be done relatively quickly is the question. I think that if the entire Army, and my friend from the gentleman that has provided so much information to me, he said, I'd rather our blood and sweat of our soldiers be if there was any blood, of course, and the sweat that's being expended overseas in the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan, he said, I would much rather it be expended here in the States and in places like North Dakota, Prudhoe Bay, that type of thing, to get the oil, to get the energy. And if we all did this, if we came together and did this as a country, we could get it done in a remarkably fast fashion. But will we? No, because we have an oligarchy, this tyrannical, this man in the White House, and his facilitators in Congress who are saying, no, we can't do this. We cannot get this oil out of the ground. We cannot run the pipeline. They are the servants of the lobbyists of the big oil companies that are, attached to Saudi Arabia and others. So no, but I think we could do it if, just like the moon, that moonshot mentality that everyone, the progressives are against.
This must get done, and everybody work together to do it. Just like we have to keep the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal open, or boy, we'd really be in trouble moving just about anything.
You're absolutely very astute in that. Yes, sir. Right on, man. So, I don't know if that answers your question. It's speculation on our part, on my part, and but with respect to the oil, we should have been working on this years ago.
Now, here's another thing that disturbs me that's extremely weird on my part. I want to know what you think about it. I don't know if you see it where you're from, but a lot of the larger cities are having these huge 96-gallon trash cans put out. They look big enough that you could put a family of 4 corpses in them. And they seem to be popping up in cities everywhere for use for both recycle and regular garbage. Do you think there's anything of that, or is this just better service for garbage?
I am unfamiliar with what you're talking about, and yet to see anything along those lines. But I'd hope the latter of what the two is the case.
With everything getting worse in this coming new year and getting worse after that, I'm just wondering if this might be convenient if people just start starving to death. Just put
they do
your
have
neighbors in the garbage. We'll pick them up on Tuesday.
They do have.
I'm going off on a tangent here. I hope you understand that.
In one of the Jesse Ventura shows that he did, they exposed in Georgia the huge thousands upon thousands of what they called these plastic coffins that could fit, up to 4 bodies.
I've seen that with him and Alex+Jones on conspiracy theory shows that you can no longer see on television. I remember seeing that. Very frightening how all the barbed wire seems to be turned inward.
Yes.
At these camps. I don't care if they do have playground equipment or not. It just doesn't seem very welcoming.
Well, I got to tell you, look, I really take issue with your conspiracy theories here, and we're going to have to send you off to a re-education camp if you keep talking this way.
Well, I'm already beyond that. I listen to you guys. I expect to see things like a blue or a red dot out by the mailbox. If you can't laugh about it, all you can do is cry about it.
Exactly, and what we could be seeing with the 96-gallon trash cans, and I know that somebody had mentioned this once before to me, and quite frankly, I didn't even give it a thought. They're rolling it out in Texas, I think, or have a lot of this in Texas. Actually, the city or the municipalities are furnishing them to residents. It could be a conspiracy with respect to Rubbermaid. No, I'm kidding about that. But it's interesting how we have to question. Isn't it interesting that we look at things now and question really what's the real agenda behind this?
It's nice to be able to.
Yes, it is. No, it is really. We have that freedom at this point. We still have that freedom, but it's I think it's important to look at these different things, and let's not take and you just proved it, and I believe that this is a good thing. Let's not take the government's word for anything or the municipality's word for anything. Let's check for ourselves. And let's
prove transparency.
There you go. Very good.
Our money being spent, we should be able to ask how and where it's going. And there should be proof in the receipt, wouldn't you think?
That's the way I'd like to see it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, but that's the way it should be. And it's sad, but, we are not seeing the receipts. And the receipts we are seeing have whiteout on them and, typewriter used to fill in where they did whiteout. And we don't know where our money's going. We don't even know where. And imagine all the money they make on the black market from the opium sales from Afghanistan, from the illegal activities that they do engage in. It is staggering the amount of. I mean, we know that through the system of economics they're using now, that a lot of what they're doing is for the purpose of just wasting money. And
you're going to see it waste before your eyes as soon as all this BRICS goes about. You see the devaluation of the dollar, where it's going to go down. It's going to have to go down at least 50%, if that's 60% of the wealth that's forming against the petrodollar to go elsewhere. I mean, you're just going to be amazed at how little you can buy once this happens. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're seeing it.
That's a lot of free money we've been making just on people converting their money to American dollars to buy oil. It's just going to disappear overnight.
And it's going to affect, whether you're listening to this show in the United States or Canada or whatever part of the world.
Because they bought treasury bonds from our country. It's just as worthless to them as it would be to us.
Absolutely. And it's going to affect the middle class and the lower class greater, and it's going to cause massive starvation. And how convenient that this goes right into their plan, their eugenicist plan. So, yeah, absolutely. Good call.
And the hardest thing in the world is to convince somebody how when hyperinflation hits, something as tangible as your precious metal coins, stay with that. It might get to a ridiculous amount of money, of $50,000 an ounce for gold, but, your gas and your milk's going to cost a ridiculous amount of money, too. It's not going to buy you a dime more, but your paper money disappears into thin air just simply because of the worth of it.
Exactly.
That tangible asset in precious metal goes up with it. You're not buying a dime more. You just didn't have something go 100% invisible on you.
That's right.
Bingo.
It's so simple to explain to somebody, but to get them to believe it is sometimes almost impossible.
Absolutely correct. I want to thank you for your call. We're going to try to get some other callers.
Yeah, let everybody else get their 2 cents worth in, and thank you so much for talking to me, and God bless you both.
Thanks for finding us, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for being there. I don't think it was accidental that I found people like you and Steve and Pastor Lindsay and Dave Hodges, and there's so many others, Alex+Jones, everybody out there, whoever's listening, just keep the fight going.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's all we can do. And glad to have you as a listener, and call in again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I miss the show live, I always look it up and try and catch it another time of the day on another day. And thank you so much for that. Wonderful service.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
I'm going to go back and listen off the phone now.
All right. Have a great day. The beauty of radio, DVR, podcasts, is that you can listen to your shows anytime.
You know what, Joe, and listeners, I want to just apologize for my inability to update the archive section of our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. It's not because I'm just laying on the couch watching reruns of the Golden Girls.
It's half true.
Okay, I'm not doing that. No, hopefully this weekend, in between a number of things, what we're trying to do is revamp and make the system a little bit more automated and have program descriptions so you can go right into our section on the guests and the show, the archives and such, and be able to have a seamless conversion or a seamless ability to grab the audio. So just please, well, thank you for your patience. That's all I wanted to say about that. Oh, before we go to the phones, whether you saw this or not, Joe, the freedomreport.us, the Ministry of Defense report, mysterious fireball that streaked across the Oregon sky, a Chinese missile. Now, the Ministry of Defense is reporting today, now this is dated the 23rd of November, so some 6 days ago, that the early warning radar system deployed along the entire Russian border. They confirmed the Republic of China Navy launching from their Type 092 XIA class nuclear ballistic missile submarine of 2 atomic JL-2 missiles off the northwest American coastline near Oregon on Wednesday, October 30th, and Wednesday, November 20th. Think about this, folks. According to this report, these 2 latest sub-launched nuclear ballistic tests by China off the west coast of the U.S. were preceded by a similar test conducted on Monday, November 10th, 2010. Remember what Steve was talking about? When a Chinese Navy Jin-class ballistic missile nuclear submarine deployed secretly from its underground home base on the south coast, Haiyan Island, launched an intercontinental ballistic missile from the international waters off of the Southern California coast in full view by those in Los Angeles, and talking to you now, John, on the stages of various Hollywood production facilities. Folks, wow.
Yeah.
This is something. Okay.
Moving along on the calls here, we're going to go to area code 970 next. Thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hi there, guys.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank you and say God bless you guys for everything you do for telling the truth and not hearing this lie you hear across all the other airways. So just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for listening, and you and all the listeners is why we do this, and we hope we never fail you. We hope that we do the best job possible, and we'll just keep doing it.
And I have a kind of a question here. We live up in the northwest corner of Colorado, and your 26th November program with Steve and what was his name, Greg?
Yeah.
That program really, well, you might want to say kind of really stirred us Colorado residents. So,
yes.
And my question is, how much truth do you put personally, you guys, in this DHS informant, I guess that he was, that told all this information to that stranger that was picked up? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well,
elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I know the backstory of this because I had talked to Steve, and then of course talked to Greg off air, and Joe was party to some of the conversation. The validity, the identity of this official, I can verify through. I can tell you this: the gentleman is who he said he is. Okay, so there's no disputing his identity, and there's no disputing his connection to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, obviously, if that said, what would be the motive for him to, we'll say, pass off information in that context or to that individual? I believe that there was it was truthful as I believe he was being as truthful as he was, or as he. I believe he believed the information that he was given, and I still do. So yes, I would rate this very high in my confidence level because I do know the backstory as far as the identity of this individual.
So is that with your background? Is that a kind of a normal thing for a person like a DHS agent, or to just start telling them a total stranger information like this?
It happens.
Yeah.
I don't know about
context.
I've never dealt with somebody on that level.
The context in which it was, there were some parts left out, caller, and to the listeners, there were some parts deliberately left out of that recounting of that story. I just want to say that there were some for the identity of the people involved. So when you look at it, you might think, well, hey, this doesn't really make sense. Why would all of a sudden some stranger just pour out this information to an individual? Trust me when I say that important parts were left out that would make more sense if they were tossed in, but then it would also present problems for the people involved. So I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. I don't want to talk in cryptic terms, but I think I have to.
So what do we do as Colorado residents to kind of prepare for something like this?
Well,
how do you prepare for something like that?
Joe and I were talking about this after that program, and we had several people email us and ask the very same question: how do you prepare? Well, I think, Joe, you just said it. You got to stay alert. You got to watch what's going on around you. You have to look at what Greg Evenson he did say, go to your local law enforcement and ask what's going on, or make yourself known in a very positive sense. Befriend somebody in law enforcement if you can. I don't recall exactly what, and I have to go back and listen to that, what Greg said, but he did give some recommendations in that, how to, endear yourself to maybe a neighborhood law enforcement or a peace officer. And again, peace officer, community police officer, peace officer, community. Somebody who lives in your backyard, your neighborhood, your community, as opposed to a federal agent of the same type.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Sure does. And
okay.
One last thing, have you heard anything, any updates on the latest on these here disputed islands south of Japan that's disputed between Japan and China?
Yes, I have heard some things, and China has recently kind of bullied their way into taking over some disputed islands that was a problem between Japan and China. And now there are reports that there were U.S. jets that were tailed by Chinese jets as they were flying over there, but there is military aircraft from China in the area and also from Japan flying around in the area. Now, any further information on that is not come to me yet, and I apologize for not being up to date on that. I did see the story, the headlines about this, and I did not dig too far into it. But
let me just throw this in here. I think this has to do with the perception of the United States being on the ropes militarily. And I say perception because we are presenting ourselves to the world as a power that's been compromised. It's been lessened, dumbed down. And look what Obama has done. Obama, and in concert with his facilitators in Congress, look what he's done to the military. What we're seeing is mischief being played out on a global scale because of the perception of weakness presented by this country. That's what I believe is taking place.
I heard just on an earlier report today that there was 2 B-52s that flew through that no-fly zone, supposedly, that the Chinese have set up over there on those island areas, and they were not, shot upon, luckily, or anything like that. But it seemed like a pretty hot zone to me.
Yeah,
it's going to only get worse, really. You've got issues, caller. Like, for example, Obama is planning to close ICBM squadron. He vowed that this, for a New START treaty, would not cause any reduction in the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force, ICBM force. But yet now there's a plan that this Obama regime has drafted to shutter this ICBM squadron 3 years. This is not coming 3 years after he assured Congress and the American people that this U.S.-Russia arms reduction treaty, remember when that was big, about 3 years ago, that we were going to stand strong with this ICBM squadron. But now we're seeing this international mischief being played out, for example, with the Chinese on the islands, in other locations, because once again of this regime's proactive stance on neutering, cutting down, tapering, not the debt, but our own military force. And we see this manifesting itself with this ICBM squadron. So what we're projecting here is a weakness that will be exploited by our enemies and friends alike on a global scale. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, sir. It sure does. And I thank you. And I thank you guys, and I pray for you every day.
Well, thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you as a member of our extended family.
All right. God bless you guys.
Have a great night.
You too.
And just to go back to what you were talking about with the president, that 1.5 minute audio, I did upload it. I want to play it real quick again for those who missed it.
Part to the Affordable Care Act, healthcare costs are growing at the slowest rate in 50 years. Employer-based healthcare costs are growing at about 1/3 the rate of a decade ago. And that means that if the studios here, your employers, aren't having to spend as much on healthcare, that they can hire more folks and reinvest more in the business and come up with those cool technologies that I don't exactly understand how they work, but were really neat to look at. And by the way, we've done all this while bringing down our deficits. After years of trillion-dollar deficits, we've reined in spending. You would think sometimes, listening to folks in Washington, that we haven't made any progress on that front. We wound down 2 wars. We changed the tax code that was too skewed towards Americans at the expense of the middle class. You add it all up, we've cut our deficits by more than half, and they continue to go down faster than any time since World War II. So, all told, our business has created 7.8 million new jobs over the past 44 months. America's gone farther, recovered faster than most other industrialized nations. But, as Melody said, we got more work to do.
Folks, there's not one truthful statement, perhaps with the exception of he doesn't understand how the technology works, in that 90-second piece of audio. So when you've got the purveyors of perversion, meaning the Obama Satoro illusion of this illusion of how do you even begin when there's not one bit of truth to that? When he takes words and phrases and says, "Oh, the deficit has been cut."
We've reduced the deficit in half.
Oh man, yeah. Well, it would be like me taking your credit card
for one week, spending $10,000 that week, then the next week spending $5,000, and saying you reduced the deficit by half.
Exactly. That's as simple as we can make that statement. Let's not make it any harder than what it has to be. It's simple economics.
Right.
Well, it's simple math.
Even though you've increased the spending by 50% from the previous, or decreased the spending by 50% from the previous week, you still increased the overall obligation by a third. Total,
exactly
$15,000. Let's move on to another call. We got 20 minutes left in the show. 306.
Rock and roll.
We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. 306.
Or 306. We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, that's you.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Let me check. Yeah, it's going.
Hey, there we go. Nice to talk to you guys.
Good to hear from you too. What's on your mind?
Yeah.
You're speaking.
Oh, not much.
To the world.
I'm up here in Canada. Sorry, I was just laying on my bed, kind of zoning out there. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
No problem. I'm jealous. What do you want to get into tonight?
Oh, I was just wondering. I've been listening to you guys for about a year now, and it's hard to kind of figure out, what's going on in Canada. Like, there's a lot of information about what's going on in the States, but it's hard to find out what's going on over here.
Well, all you have to do is really look at what's happening in the United States, and I tell this, Judy McLeod from Canada Free Press. Since you're up in Canada, I don't know whether you're a reader of Canada Free Press.
Yeah, I follow it a bit.
Okay, if you're plugged into CanadaFreePress.com, you can get a good sense. Although it's a lot of that material is directed toward the U.S., you can get a good sense of what's going on in Canada. But the fact is, it's real simple. Canada is kind of like the little brother of the United States. When we sneeze, Canada catches a cold. I mean, it's that kind of a relationship. So, really, what you're seeing in Canada is kind of a diluted version of what you're seeing happening in the United States, or a delayed version, I should say. So, yeah, I mean, although it's a different political structure you have.
Yeah,
it's the same.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the same. It's really it's the same objective. We're headed for a slave planet, where we're all slaves and subjugated to the crown. So,
yeah, you bet.
Yep.
No, it's good though. It's good. You guys, I really enjoy the guests you guys have on, and me and my wife listen. Usually, most nights, and it's really a blessing. Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Give your wife a big hug for us, and
yeah, you bet.
tell her thanks.
No, guys,
for
I really appreciate it, and yeah, we got your back over here, and I pray for you guys all the time too. I mean,
well, thank you.
Keep on keeping on, keep it up, and yeah, you're doing a good job.
All right, my friend. Well, God bless you, and stay warm up there. Try to stay warm in the bitter north. Yeah. All right. God bless
it's
you.
cold. Yeah. We've already had -40 this year already here.
Wow.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you like
that's
in the
Celsius
Yukon or what? I mean,
no, that's degrees. That's degrees Celsius. -40.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's still very
I'm in
cold.
northern Saskatchewan, right? So, yeah, it's cold here.
I love the accent, by the way. It takes me back to. You're probably not old enough, but in the early or mid '70s, right after Saturday Night Live rolled out, they had the. I don't remember. I don't recall the names of the two guys, but that's what your accent reminds me of. But great
that's
accent.
funny.
Yeah.
My name's Jordy, by the way, just so you know.
Jordy?
Yeah. You bet.
Okay, Jordy. All right. Wow. Well, that's cool, bud.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, you guys take her easy.
All right, we'll do.
We will, and you have a great night.
All right.
Take care. One thing I want to hit before we hit another phone call is this document I came across from the National Learning Consortium, and it talks about the implementation of electronic healthcare records, and it talks about a change management. Now, it says change in healthcare is moving at a rapid pace as practices strive to implement regulatory and policy requirements.
Oh, okay. What kind of change, Joe? I mean,
well, at first it says there's a process. There's a three-phase process. The first phase of this process, from going to a current state to the future state, is creating a climate for change.
So, in other words, what you're telling me, if I'm hearing you correctly, is we are being softened up and being molded and shaped. We're actually being worked. We're being worked as an audience.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Conditioned, maybe.
Now we talk about the Hegelian dialect. This is it. Only this is called the Cotter's three-phased approach to managing change.
Interesting.
Phase 1, creating a climate for change. Phase 2, engaging and enabling the organization.
Okay.
Phase 3, implementing and sustaining the change. And what their change is from paper to electronic health records. From successful implementation of their electronic healthcare records for all patients is the end goal. And they list, a few other things in the in-betweens here. But they want to establish a sense of urgency on why we need to change from our current state and why the future state is better and why we need it now.
Well, I can almost fill in the blanks here, Joe. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine, for example, let's toss amnesty. We don't have to, but just for fun, we'll toss amnesty for illegal aliens here in this country into the mix, and then throw health care on top of it, or whatever order you decide. And, of course, we now have identification issues, especially with the porous nature of the health care records being kept. It's so porous. There's leaks of identity going everywhere. So they issue, between the illegal alien aspect of things and the healthcare issues, they issue ID cards. But wait, they get lost. You're going to lose yours. You've lost yours, Joe. And, so many people lose them. And not only that, they're stolen, and identities are stolen. How can you be sure that your identity is protected? And doggone it.
An argument the government makes. You're on a trip, on vacation in a different city.
Right.
You break your leg or get knocked unconscious and go to the local hospital.
Right.
How are they supposed to know what you're allergic to? How are they supposed to know who you are if you say who you say you are, if the ID is real in your wallet?
That's true.
This is why we need an permanent implantable identifier inside of you.
Yeah, so you don't lose it.
And to make sure you're not a terrorist.
Oh, of course. Wow. Now, folks, do you see how we're being conditioned for this? And I kind of sounded deliberately so sarcastic about this, but
right. And
this is how it's going.
Creating a climate for change, building a sense of urgency, building and guiding a coalition, a team of natural leaders for the change initiative, creating a vision for the future state. Now, step 2, phase 2, engaging and enabling the organization, communicate the future state by innovating ways, use the vendor, demonstrations, videos, role-playing, simulations as a technique to match the practice culture. Alternatively, have your staff visit practices that have successful implementation rates. Ensure that a staff of clear understanding and authority are given to them. Authority.
Yeah. In other words, you visit and you model after the practices, for example, doctors' practices, offices, the groups that are successfully talking people or advancing this particular agenda. So all the rope-a-dopes are going to gleefully embrace this implantable chip stuff.
And we're going to go to one more call, but just the last part in this change, the phase 3, implementing and sustaining change, it says continue to focus on problem areas, promote solutions, and help change individual behavior to achieve organizational goals. What they said is change individual behavior, and they are going the bottom line. Do not stop. Do not give up. The goal is to ensure the guiding team will have the eventually result in a change in the organization culture that aligns with the future state. So they're going to create the change in our behaviors that they need to for us to align with their future goal of the future state.
As you said, the Hegelian dialectic problems,
reaction solution.
Yeah.
Going back to the phones, 410-410. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, November 29th, on this Friday, November 29th. Glad you're here.
Yeah, you're up.
Hey, gentlemen. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Hanukkah. How you doing? I'll be brief.
Very well.
And your callers tonight, I know you got not much time left, so I'll be brief. Your callers tonight gave me a good segue, as well as your comments. I wanted to put something on your radar. Oh, this is moving. How you doing?
Very well. Glad you're with us.
Around, if you got a pencil, around 2007, 2008, a couple events happened. The National Guard started recruiting for internment and resettlement specialists. Internment and resettlement specialists. Now, in conjunction with that, they also published a document, Internment and Resettlement Operations.
I think Joe's got that on his desk.
I have that.
And I've read it. I've read every page of it.
Okay.
Now, what inspired me to do that was simply, I read all the Agenda 21 documentation as well years earlier, and 9/11 prompted me to do that. So where I'm going, another thing adjacent to that, and this is just some research prompters, is between 24 and 28 states also realign their National Guard structure, and they align their chaplains with public affairs. And their mission statement changed. The mission statement changed from, servicing the soldiers to pacifying the population during operation. And that's subjective. Some people will agree with that, some won't. But I'm taking everything from doctrine. These things are real and they're published. And what is concerning is the recruitment of the internment and resettlement specialists in the National Guard. That's the home front. That's not foreign. That's the home front. And all of this stuff is mature now. For example, these activities took place 5-6 years ago. Everything's in place now. And if you look at the public record solicitations for setting up camps, it's 96 hours. They have to be, they've spent money. They've executed money saying, be ready to put these things in place. So where am I going with this is simply it would be nice to have a few lieutenant governors or state preparedness officials, along with some FEMA representatives, maybe dialogue this in a future show. It would be awesome. Because I really want to know what this stuff's all for. Because the potential here is, a gulag. And just be moving.
Very much.
Don't want to be going to any gulag. So, hey, I know you're short on time, so I'll take your comments offline. And thanks for taking my call, because I really researched this stuff only out of professional interest. And I retired during President Clinton's administration from the Army, and I retired the most important rank ever, and that was U.S. citizen and civilian. So this stuff's important to me. You all take care.
Thank you so much. All right. Wow.
Bye.
Joe, we've gone through this internment and resettlement.
Yes.
But he did bring up one important point that I know you've researched, you've taken notes on, I've seen them, is that the chaplains, the mission statement, the realignment of duties, the redirection of duties of the military chaplains, and specifically the chaplain program in the National Guard. I've got to tell you, this is disconcerting, and a lot of people are missing that aspect of. They'll look at the 2007, 2008 documents of the internment and resettlement. They'll look at those documents, and they'll see the military. They'll see the various aspects of this from a secular point of view. But what they fail to realize is exactly what this gentleman just referenced: is the religious aspect of this, which ties directly into Obama's what that Mickey Weinstein, the guy appointed for the military, and look at the damage he's doing presently.
And I don't have the document pulled up in front of me, but if I can, this will be pretty much word for word. They say, they break down the internees or detainees into 4 different groups. You have a displaced citizen, an internee civilian. You have a enemy combatant, and there was one more person of interest or something along those lines. And they talk about the teaching of religion in these groups, and they're only going to teach the nationally accepted elements of the specific religion. So right now, if Christian Americans were put into a Christian American FEMA camp chaplain ran service, gay marriage would be an accepted national Christian plank, according to the internment and resettlement operations document.
And if I can, or if I may, if you start to unveil really the religion of the New World Order,
the mystery religions.
Yeah. If you look at the way this religious, and I use the term religious without apology, the religious public unveiling that's been occurring over time here, the average person who sees really only the exoteric, so they're going to miss it completely. But you've got to look back in history. Remember, past is prologue. The further back you look, the further ahead you can see. You got to take into consideration, folks, and make this part of your searching research. That is, look at the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the 30th to the 33rd degrees of the Illumination. This is the driving force, the belief driver of action that we're seeing that's going to be unveiled and intertwined in this global religion.
Hold on, because I can get you a little bit even deeper than that here. Let me find this document.
All right, this is cool. I like this.
We have and I read this to you.
Yes, you did. I know where you're going with this. Go ahead. I love it.
The Pythagorean Brotherhood. The Pythagorean Brotherhood was devoted to the study of mathematics. It had a great effect on future esoteric Pythagorean Brotherhood.
Sorry about that. You threw me off there for a second. Yeah.
And it says it had the greatest effects on future esoteric traditions such as Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, both of which were scientific mystical groups dedicated to the study of mathematics, geometry, and logical reasoning as opposed to religious dogma. Both Freemasonry and Rosicrucian have claimed to have evolved out of the, how does that go? Pythagorean,
right?
Pythagorean Brotherhood, and the mystical and occult qualities of the Pythagorean mathematics are discussed in Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of All Ages, and it goes on from there.
And folks, the Pythagorean belief, that belief system, this is why and where and how the occult numerology, the symbolism, the numerology, this gematria, this is why this is so important. And that kind of, boy, it's a heck of a time to end the show, but that's why it's so important, because it's based on an occult philosophy. And it's a pure Luciferian doctrine. It's the doctrine of Illuminism. And there's symbology for this religion. Oh, my goodness, it's so intense, and it pertains to the